Your I can statement for today is I can identify multiplication as scaling. And I'm going to be honest, prior to this unit, I had never heard of multiplication as scaling. I think it's a new standard that's being assessed. So this will be an interesting unit for us to work with each other on. Basically, you want to think of scaling or multiplication as scaling as resizing something. So making something bigger, making something smaller based on what you know about the numbers in the problem. So let's go through this together and I'll explain a little bit about what I mean. Your sample problem for today is Sue knitted scarves that are 4 feet long for herself and her friends, Joe and John. After a month, they compared the length of their scarves. Some scarves had stretched and some had shrunk. The results are shown in the chart below. How had the length of Joe and John's scarves changed? And since I'm going to just put John instead of Alan, but you can leave it as Alan. Okay. So there's John's. Okay. So let's just start with the cubing strategy, circling any key numbers. So we have 4 feet. And then we also have these numbers down here that I'm just going to put a little dot next to so that I know to come back to them. I'm underlining the question. How had the length of Joe and John's scarves changed? I'm boxing any keywords. So feet, compared, stretched. We know that when we stretch something, it gets bigger, and when we shrink something, it gets smaller. I'm going to eliminate anything I don't need. And then I'm going to solve. So step one, again, just to remind you before we get into step one, you want to think of multiplication as resizing something. So either making something bigger or smaller or staying the same. Because we know that if we multiply anything by 1, it stays the same. So let's use number sense to compare the lengths of these. So what you're trying to do is determine how the lengths of the scarves have changed over the past month without computing anything, without doing any math. You want to look at these numbers and use what you know about numbers to identify a pattern or see a change. So we know that Sue knitted a scarf that was 4 feet long. Okay, so this 4 is kind of our average. This is our home base, if you want to call it. All of the scarves started at 4 feet long, okay? As the month went on, Joe and John's scarves were changed a little bit. So we can see the dimensions for Joe's scarf is 1 1/2 times 4. Knowing what you know about number sense or about numbers, take a minute to think if this product, 1 1/2 times 4, is bigger than 4 or less than 4. Did it increase in size or did it shrink in size? So take a minute to think about that. Okay, so here I have the dimensions of Joe's scarf after a month. Here's where it started at 4, and now it's 1 1/2 times 4. So what do we know about this number? What can we identify? Well, here's where it started, and here's what happened to it. 1 whole and 1/2 is what I have. 1 1/2 put together is much bigger than 1, right? It increased, right? The 4 feet that it originally started at, I multiplied it by 1 whole and another half, which means that it had to increase in size. However, when we look at John's, 3/4 times 4, I see that 3/4 is just under a whole, because 4/4, if this said 4/4, that would be my whole, and then I would know that John's scarf stayed the same. but 3/4 is just under 1 whole. So I can identify that John's scarf shrunk because I'm multiplying my original scarf by something less than 1. So just as a note for yourself to jot down, a number multiplied by anything less than 1 will decrease in size. A number multiplied by anything greater than 1 will increase in size. And that should make sense to you because we know that if we multiply something by 1, it stays the same. And if we multiply it by something greater than 1, the size will increase. And if we multiply it by something less than 1, the size will decrease. So my step 2 just says identify the changes that were made. Did the items get larger, smaller, or stay the same? So we know that Sue's right here stayed the same. That's what she knitted the scarves as. It stayed the same. Joe, on the other hand, we multiplied his original scarf by 1 1/2, and the size increased. And we multiplied John's scarf by 3/4, and the size decreased. So I would just say in your text that Sue stayed the same. Sue's scarf stayed the same. Joe's scarf stretched out. And John's scarf shrunk. Okay. Now I want you to try number 2 on your own. The directions say to order the following products from least to greatest without doing any calculation. You want to try to do it without any math first, just by looking at the numbers and what you know about the numbers. You can see that the base number, or the thing that stays constant, is 3/5 in this case. Okay? We see 3/5 in this problem, in this problem, in this problem, and in this problem. So you want to look at those numbers first, the 3/5, and see what they're being multiplied by and order them based on what you know about their numbers. Go ahead and try that now. Okay, so hopefully you were able to look at these numbers and put them in order. So remember that 3/5 is my base. In this problem, I'm multiplying 3/5 by 2. So I know already that it's going to double in size, right? But in this one, I'm multiplying it by 2 1/4. So it's going to double in size plus add another 4th onto it. With this problem, I can see that 5/5 is also equal to 1. So I know that I'm actually multiplying 3/5 times 1. And in this problem, I see that 3/4 is less than 3/5, and it's also less than 1. So I know that since 3/4 is less than 1, my item is going to shrink or get smaller, right? 3/5 is going to get smaller if I multiply it by something less than 1. So that should tell you that that's the product that would come first, 3/4 times 3/5. So that product would be less than 1. Then we have a product that would be exactly 1, so that should come next, 5/5 times 3/5. So that's exactly 1. Then we have a product that's being doubled, so that should come next, 2 times 3/5. Or we have a fraction that's being doubled. And then we have a fraction that's being doubled and attaching a 4th to it. So 2 1/4 times 3/5 should be my last problem, or my last order. So I multiplied my fraction by something less than 1, exactly 1, doubled, and then doubled plus a 4th. So that's the order that these products would go in from least to greatest. And you could certainly solve these now and see if you're correct and see if the answers do go in order from least to greatest. And step 2 just says identify the changes that were made. Did the product get larger, smaller, or stay the same? So we know that this product got smaller. going to put an S for smaller. This product stayed the same. I'm just going to draw a line. This product got bigger. I'm going to put a plus sign. And this product got bigger as well because we multiplied it by more than 1 and more than 1 in this case. Okay, try number 3 on your own. And when you're ready, hit the next arrow. Notice that we have 2/3 in each problem. So that's what you're basing your scaling off of. Alrighty. So hopefully you were able to see that, well, first and foremost, if we just look at these two products, we see that we're multiplying by something significantly greater than 1. So we know that we're going to have to deal with those at the end. Okay? Then we're going to compare 1/5 and 1/3. And we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, which one is smaller? We already know that the product will be it will be smaller because we're multiplying it by something less than 1. But we have to determine if 1/5 or 1/3 is smaller. And hopefully you were able to identify that 1/5 is in fact smaller because we're breaking it up into 5 pieces instead of 3. So 1/5 over 2/3 should be first. Then 1/3 over 2/3, I'm sorry. And then we're going to compare the 4.5 times 2/3 and 4 times 2/3. So hopefully you said that 4 times 2/3 comes next because we're quadrupling it, the product. And then in this case, we are quadrupling it and adding 1/2 to 2/3. So hopefully this is the order that you had when you did it yourself. And again, you can do the work. You can now do the work and see if your products are in fact in order from least to greatest. And then again, step 2 just says identify the changes that were made. Did the product get larger, smaller, or stay the same? So we know since we multiplied by something less than 1, this would get smaller. Again, multiplying by something less than 1, this would get smaller. And both of these would get bigger or increase in size because we're multiplying by something significantly larger than 1. Good luck on your math today. If you have questions, make sure that you stop at the back table to see one of us and take your time on your formative.